Good morning, students. Students, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Today we are going to discuss ecological adaptation. Right? What is ecological adaptation? Actually, an organism modifies its character, its structure according to the environmental condition. That is called adaptation or ecological adaptation. The place where an organism, I mean a plant, which grows according to the natural habitation. The plant system has to be modified according to the condition, right? That is called the ecological adaptation. Actually, ecological adaptation is nothing but there is a modification in the structure of organism in order to survive in the world according to the environmental condition. That is called the ecological adaptation. So, if a plant grows in water body, according to the condition of water body, the plant has to be modified its structure. That is called adaptation. On the other hand, if a plant grows in dry region or dryness or desert region, according to the condition of dry region or arid condition, the plant has to be modified its structure. That is called the adaptation. Okay, so this simply it is called there is a modification in the structure of organism, the place where an organism grows and lives and survives, right? So that is called the ecological adaptation. Okay, now the ecological adaptation is broadly divided into following types. The first type is Hydrophytes. The first type is the Hydrophytes. Hoping that hydro means water, phyte means plants. That means the plant which grows in water body like a pond, stream, lake, pool, etc. So this is called Hydrophytes. Hydro means water, phyte means plant. That means the plant which grows in water is called Hydrophytes. I'm going to give you a number of examples for each category, right? Now let me take different types of ecological adaptation. The second one is Xerophytes. I'm talking about types of ecological adaptation. Xerophyte means the plant which grows in dry region or arid condition, or 0% of water in a soil, where the place where an organism grows, that is called Xerophytes. I repeat once again, Xerophyte is a kind of adaptation in which there is no source of water to the plant, right? Even though absence of water throughout the year, the plant, it may be grown and it may be completed its span of life. That is called Xerophytes. Then what is Xerophyte? What are the types of Xerophytes? Then what is its morphological adaptation and physiological adaptation and anatomical adaptation? We are going to discuss, right? Just leave it. We'll come back, right? Okay. And let me take the third categories. That is Mesophytes. Mesophytes. That means the plant may be grown in the presence of water or by the absence of water. That is called the mesophyte. So the influence of water and dry region, it may not be affected the growth of the plant. That is called mesophyte. Whether presence of plenty of water or absence of water in a region where the plant grows and survives and completes span of life, that is called mesophyte. And one more category I'd like to mention, the fourth type is Halophytes. Halo means salinity. The place where you see the soil is saturated with a higher amount of salt, or salty places, or salty water, or salty region where the plant grows and completes span of life. That is called the Hydrophytes. For that, I would like to give an example for Hydrophytes. If you go to picture, you can see Mangrove Forest. The mangrove forest is a forest where you see the soil is highly saturated with the saline. In the salinity, you can see a number of plants are grown, right? That is called the Hydrophytes. And one more category I want to mention, that is Epiphytes. Epi means above, phyte means plant. That means some orchids plant may be grown in other branches of a tree, that is called epiphytes. For that, I want to give an example for epiphytes. Orchid is Vanda plant. Vanda. It is a right example of epiphytes. So these are all the types of ecological adaptation. I repeat once again, ecological adaptation, it is nothing more. There is a structural modification in an organism, the place where an organism grows in order to survive. It has to be modified, its morphological characters, anatomical characters, and physiological characters, including right from root, stem, leaf. In those organs, there is a modification in order to grow, in order to survive in a particular environment. That is called ecological adaptation, right? Actually, ecological adaptation is essential of an organism in order to exist under a prevailing habitat or condition. That is called simply ecological adaptation. Dear students, did you understand what I taught you today? My dear students, could you tell us in few words what do you understand about ecological adaptation? Students, am I audible? Dear students?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Could you tell me in few words what do you understand about ecological adaptation? There is a I repeat once again.
The modifications in the structure of organisms
That's a very good. There is a
to
modification.
survive successfully.
Simply, there is a modification which occurs in the structure of root, stem, leaf. Why this modification occurs in an organism means in order to survive successfully in a particular environment. If it is a water body, in order to grow the complete span of life, it has to be modified its root characters and stem characters and leaf characters, right? On the other hand, I can say, if your plants are grown in dry region or xeric condition, according to the dry condition, the root system is going to be modified and shoot system or stem is going to be modified and leaves also modified in order to survive such an environmental condition, right? So that is called an adaptation, right? Adaptation is nothing but it is a process by which there is a structural modification that you see in the plant, the place where an organism, I mean a plant grows and survives and complete its span of life. That is called ecological adaptation. Very good. And could you classify ecological adaptation? What I have classified. Dear students, how many types are there? Simply
5 types.
very good. What are they? Could you read out?
Hydrophytes,
Hydrophytes, very good.
xerophytes, halophytes, epiphytes.
Hydrophytes and epiphytes. Very good. Good. Keep it up. Then, dear students, do you understand about hydrophytes? Hydro means water, right? My dear students, could you repeat what do you mean by hydrophytes?
Plants living in water.
Living in water.
Plants may live in water, right? That is a hydrophyte. Very good. Then what do you understand about a xerophyte?
Plants living in
Plants
dry
living in
conditions.
dry
Very good.
conditions.
A plant, if you take any plant, the plant which grows in dry region or dryness, the place where you see dryness. Generally, dryness which occurs in summer season only in our country, right? Okay. In such an environment, some plants may be grown. Throughout the year, it may be completed span of life, it may be grown, and it may be involved in synthesis of food material. All the biological activities are taking place. Even the plants are grown in dry region. But according to the condition, the plant root or stem leaves are modified morphologically, anatomically, physiologically, according to the environmental condition, according to the habitation. The plant pots are modified. So that's why I mentioned in beginning, there is a structural changes that will occur in morphological characters, in physiological characters, in anatomical characters. So this is called as ecological adaptation. So as I said, there is a structural changes. Based on the changes, we can classify into following types: Hydrophytes, Xerophytes, Mesophytes, Helophytes, and Epiphytes. Okay, so first of all, let me take what is Hydrophytes and how many types are the Hydrophytes. Then what are the morphological changes in root? In what are the morphological changes in stem? In what are the morphological changes in leaf? Like that. What are the anatomical changes in leaf and stem and root? Like that. And what are the physiological changes? What are the physiological changes according to the environmental condition, right? That you are going to see in Hydrobates. Dear student, first of all, I am going to discuss very elaborately Hydrobates. So, as I said, the hydrophyte means a plant which grows in water body, that is called the hydrophytes. Dear students, could you list out any water bodies? My dear students, could you list
Sir.
out any water bodies that you see?
Pond, lake,
Pond, very good.
river,
Pond, okay, very good. Pond, then
lake,
very good. Then
rivers,
river, very good.
Canal.
Canal, right. Then
wells,
well, very good. Well, stream and pools, right? Pond, stream, lake, pool, and one more very big, large. See, the largest
ocean,
ocean. Very good. So these are all the water body. In this water body, the plant may be grown in order to survive successfully according to the environmental conditions. Here, this is an environment which consists of plenty of water, right? In such a habitation, such a condition, such a ecological adaptation, the plants are grown and completed span of life, right? That is called a hydrophyte. Very good. So hydrophytes are broadly divided into following types based on the habitation. So based on the habitation, it is the following. Further, I'm talking about types of hydrophytes, right? As I said, hydrophytes are following types. The first type is free floating hydrophytes. That means some members of plant kingdom may float on surface of water. That is called a free floating hydrophytes. Free floating hydrophytes. Right? Second category, rooted floating hydrophytes. Rooted floating hydrophytes. Third category is submerged. Submerged floating. That means a plant which grows on the surface of water freely without the contact of soil particle. The root system is not fixed with the mud or soil. Such a condition is known as a free floating Adrobates. A second type is a rooted floating. Even it is floating on the surface of water, but its root system has to be more fixed in the soil particle or mud. That is called rooted and floating. And third type is a submerged floating. That means some members of plant kingdom has been submerged or in between surface and bottom of the water in a water body that is a freely floating. That is called a submerged floating. That means partially dipping inside of the water. That is called a submerged floating. It is not floating exactly on the surface of water, but it is submerged in between surface and bottom of the water, right? So it is a freely floating. I'm going to give a number of examples for each one, right? And the next category is rooted and submerged. Rooted. The plant has well developed root system which is fixed with the mud or soil, and additionally it is submerged. That means the plant is not floating on the surface of water, but instead it is submerged. The root is fixed with the soil or mud, and its branches and stem and leaves are submerged and floating in between the surface and bottom of the water. That in the region you can see the root, stem and leaves are submerged and floating. That is I'm talking about fourth categories of hydrophytes. And the last type, that is amphibious or emergent type. Amphibious. Amphibious means the plants are rooted with the mud or soil, and its leaves are floating on the surface of plant. That is called amphibious. That means amphi means both. So it shows two different characters, morphological characters. If you take a leaves, there are two types of leaves out there, right? Dissected leaves and gentile leaves. The dissected leaves are present at bottom of the water, and this entire leaf that you see the surface of the water. So that is called amphibious. I'm going to give a number of examples for each one. For amphibious, just I can say, right example, or Sagittaria. So Sagittaria and ranunculus. This is very peculiar characteristic features of amphibious category, right? So hydrophytes are simply hydrophytes are nothing but a plant which grows in water is known as a hydrophytes, right? Dear students, my dear students, do you understand about the free floating? My dear students, what do you understand about the free floating hydrobates? Students, am I audible?
Yes, sir. The plants which are freely floating on the surface of water.
Simply you can say the plant which grows on the surface of water. If you see any water body, some plants are floating naturally, right? Have you seen anywhere? The plants are floating on surface of water. During rainy season, you can see some plants are floating the surface of water. So all the water body is filled with fulfilled with water, right? Due to heavy rain. Have you seen anywhere? Very good. And next, what do you understand about rooted floating? If you go to lake in your locality, in your area, in your village, right? In your region, you can see some Nelumbo plant, lotus, right? Have you seen lotus?
Yes, sir.
It is a root in the mud or it is fixed with the soil, but its leaves and flowers are floating in the surface of water. Have you seen anywhere such a plant? That is called, you can classify, you can categorize under rooted floating. Do you understand? Right. Our next category is a submerged floating. What do you understand about the submerged floating? The root is not fixed with the mud, and the flower of leaves are not floating on the surface of the water, but it is submerged and floating in between surface and bottom of the water in any water body. Have you seen anywhere? For that, I can say a right example: Ceratophyllum, Utricularia. They are the right example. I am going to show you, no problem, right? I will show you. Then fourth category is rooted and submerged. Dear student, here please understand the word rooted. Rooted means it is fixed with the mud, and submerged means the leaves are floating not on the surface of the water, but the leaves and stems are submerged just behind the water, surface of water, just beneath the water or upper part of the water body. The last category is amphibious. Dear students, could you tell me what is amphibious? The root is fixed with the soil and the leaves and flowers are floating on surface of the water. Have you seen? This is called amphibious. Okay, first of all, let me take free floating water. Free floating hydrophytes. Free floating hydrophytes. Free floating hydrophytes are nothing but a plant freely floating on the surface of water, right? For that, I'm going to give some example. Ulfia, Pistia. I'd like to give some example, right? The first one, the first category is Ulfia. Ulfia and Pistia. Pistia. And one more category, Hycornia. So they are the example of free floating Adrobates. Dear students, would you like to see the plant? Ulfia, which is the smallest flowering plant in the world. But talking about Ulfia, it is the Smallest. It is the smallest flowering plant. Right? Which of the following is known as the smallest flowering plant? Could you tell me?
Ulfia.
Ulfia is the smallest flowering plant. Very good. Very interesting topic. This is right. And Pistia. Pistia also free floating because the plants are floating on the surface of water. And Iconia, you know very well, Iconia is grown in almost all the lakes, right? In water body, you can see Iconia plant. Both of them are free floating. They are the example of free floating hydrophyte. Freely, these members are floating on the surface of water, hence they are known as free floating hydrophytes. Would you like to see the plant? Dear students, would you like to see the plant?
Yes, sir.
Right, let me show you. It is simple. If you see some pond slags, etc., right, in which you find so this is a free floating hydrophytes, right? Yes, student, the first, there is a printing mistake, please rectify. So A is not a Iconia, A is a Pistia. A is a Pistia. It is a printing mistake, please rectify. This is a Pistia. And B is a Iconia. B is right, I can say. It is a Iconia plant. Please rectify. So both of them are here. It is a printing mistake. Please rectify. Yes, students. Did you rectify? Students are variable. I have given two examples. One is Iconia and another is Pistia. So there is a little printing mistake, right? So the first diagram indicates Pistia and the second diagram indicates Iconia. So both of them are example of free floating Adrobates. Okay. Now this is a water body in which you see the plants are floating freely on the surface of water, right? But here, instead of root cap, here in hydrophyte member, root packet is there. So root is covered by, there is a packet-like structure that covers growing point of the root. That is called the root packet. Sometimes root packet is characteristic which is of dash strand. That is the question. If it is asked, just you got right? Whereas in Pistia, root is poorly developed, right? So this is one of the anatomical characters. While discussing anatomical character, I'll tell you that, right? So please understand the free floating Adrobates, Iconia and Pistia, which are given by mistake, right, in your textbook. Please rectify. The first diagram indicates Pistia, and the second diagram indicates Iconia. And what is the difference between Pistia and Iconia? Iconia consists of root packets, and the root is well developed, but it is not covered by root packet, right? And the Pistia, in case of your root, is not developed well, but it is freely floating on the surface of water. And both of them are having a leaf and a herongametous tissue. When we take a cross section of the stem of these free floating Adrobates such as Pistia and the Iconia, right? And one more typical difference I am going to show you in case of Iconia. The petiole, which is inflated in nature, which is filled with a large amount of air. That's why it helps the plant to float on the surface of water. Actually, this leaf petiole, which becomes inflammation, and that is filled with air, right? and this condition helps the plant to float on the surface of water. In addition to that, you can see offset is there, and this plant is propagated by offset, right? Offset is a kind of vegetative propagation by which these plants are reproduced in its next generation. So this is simply something about free floating hydrobates, right? Okay, my dear student, which of the following plant consists of stolen? Could you tell me? Stolen is nothing but it's a stem-like structure by which the pistia plant which propagates, right? Dear student, could you mention which of the following plant consists of stolen? A. Pistia, B. Iconia. What's the option?
Pistia.
Pistia. Pistia. Repeat the word once again. Pistia. Right. And which of the one more question I'm going to create for NEET and board exam, right? So please understand which of the following plant consists of implanted petiole that helps in floating of water?
Icornium.
Icornia. Icornia, right? So both of them are a fibrous root system.
Iconia.
Right? Very good. So did you rectify, ma? The printing mistake?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Shall I go for next topic?
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Yes, sir.
So next we pass on to free floating is over. The next one is rooted floating. I'm talking about rooted.
Yes, sir.
Rooted floating. Actually, rooted floating is already I have explained very clearly. Rooted means the root system is fixed in the soil, and the plants, leaves, and branches are floating on the surface, right? That is called a rooted floating. This is a right example of a rooted floating. For that, there are a number of examples are there. Nelumbo, Nympia, Marsilia. So they are the plants. The place in your locality, in your region, you see, right? Nympia and Marsilia, they are the right example for rooted floating. Because why it is rooted? Because the root system or rhizoid, the root system is fixed with the soil. If you take any water body in which some plants roots are fixed with the mud, right? So now this is a region where you see soil with the water, that is a mud or soil in which root is initiated, and the root system which is grown towards the surface of water and beards, these leaves are floating at the surface of water, right? So this is called rooted and floating. Rooted and floated. Rooting and floating, simply you can say. The plants are rooting with the soil, floating on surface of water, simply. Dear student, do you understand what is a rooted floating hydrophytes? The plant is rooted with the soil and it's floating its leaves on the surface of water. That's called rooted floating hydrophytes. I have given a number of examples. Nympia and Marsilia. Which of the following is an example for rooted floating? Dear students, could you mention the example for rooted floating? One of you please answer.
Nymphia and Marsilia.
Nympia and Marsilia. Boys, one of you.
Lympia and Marsilia.
What are they? Exactly what are they? They are the
Root floating hydrophyte.
rooted floating hydro. What do you mean by rooted? Could you tell me?
Yes, sir.
Please tell us in few words.
Root is fixed in the soil
Very good.
and flower is
Flower
Make
and leaves are, and seeing the picture you can say. And seeing the picture, Leaves are floating. Leaves and flowers are floating. That is a difference, right? The root is fixed with the mud or soil, and its leaves and flowers are floating on the surface of water. That is called rooted floating. Now, as we compare with the first category, free floating, you can make very clearly different, right? In case of free floating, the plants are floating, not fixed with the mud or soil. But in second case, you see the plant's roots are fixed with the soil, and the leaves or flowers are floating surface of it. So that is called rooted floating. And could you give an example for rooted floating once again? Example. I have given two examples. Please catch and answer. You are taking too much of time. It's too late to answer. Dear students.
Nymphaea and Marsilia.
Nymphaea and Marsilia. Very good. So let's go for next topic.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Okay, very good. The third category is submerged floating. Submerged floating. Submerged floating. I'm talking about hydrophyte member, simply submerged. So in this case, root is not fixed. Simply I can say here root is not fixed. Root is not fixed with the soil, but floating. Right? That is called a submerged. For that, I would like to give an example for that. The first category is a ceratophyllum. Ceratophyllum. And one more example, Utricularia. Utricularia. Yes, students, I have given two examples for submerged floating. What are they? Ceratophyllum and Utricularia. Actually, what is it? It is not fixed with the mud, but it is floating, not on the surface of the water, just middle of the water body. Dear student, would you like to see the plant? Do you want to see? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
No, it is very simple, man. It is very easy to understand. Now, this is a plant where you see in water body. But even it is not fixed with the soil, but it may be subdued in the world by observation of moisture, water, nutrients, which are spread out in the water body, right? So actually in ceratophyllum, the first case is a ceratophyllum. This is a ceratophyllum. Yes, student, please kindly cooperate. Don't try to make unnecessary noise, right? Okay, this is a ceratophyllum. The ceratophyllum, it is a grown or it is subdued in the water body. Even it is not fixed with the mud or soil. There is no presence of root. But the leaves are there. All the leaves are dissected in nature and submerged leaves. And these submerged leaves are helps. Simply, the submerged leaf helps the plant to float, not on the surface of water, right? Just in the middle of the water body. It may be floating. So that is called a submerged Adrobates. Submerged floating Adrobates. And one more example, Utricularia. Here, talking about the Utricularia, it is also known as a bladderwort. It is also called as bladderwort. Could you mention its another name instead of Utricularia? Dear students, bladewort. Which of the following plant is known as a bladewort? Dear students, could you answer please? Utricularia is also known as, which of the following plant is known as
Utricularia.
Utricularia.
Very good. And could you give an example for submerged hydrobites? One more example.
Teratophyllum.
Ceratophyllum.
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 Ceratophyllum. Please follow me.
Phylum.
Ceratophyllum. Actually, ceratophyllum, it's an hydrophyte. Particularly, I can say it's a submerged floating hydrobites. The leaves and stems are submerged just beneath the water body and floated. Right? That is called a submerged floating hydrobites. The answer is hidden in the title, submerged. It is not fixed with the soil. Instead, it is submerged in the water body by the absence of root and floating and traveling and living in the water body, right? In hydrophytes. So that is a submerged floating hydrophytes. Okay, shall we move on next topic, dear students?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Okay, next we pass on to rooter with the submerged. This is also very interesting character. Rooter with the submerged, rooter plus submerged. Rooter submerged. Previously, just now we discussed submerged only. It is not fixed with the soil or mud by the absence of rooter. But in this case, we are going to see root is there. Root is well developed, which is fixed in the soil. And the stem and leaves are floating. Stem and leaves are simply floating. Where? Just beneath the water or floating, not on the surface of the water, just behind the surface of water, behind the upper part of the water body, right? I mean, middle of the water body. So that is called a rooted submerged. Dear student, would you like to see the plant? Rooted and submerged, because root is fixed with the mud and its stem and the leaves are submerged and floating. The middle portion of the water body, if you take any water body, right? So such a condition is rooted submerged, right? Would you like to see the plant once again for you? So this is a plant where you see the Valixnaria. Actually, this plant which bears a ribbon-like structure. The stem and leaves are ribbon-like structure, and they have well-developed root system which is fixed with the soil. And the leaves and the flowers are submerged. They are not coming out from the surface of the water body, but you see just behind the upper part of the water body, you see the floating of leaves and flowers. So such a manner is known as a rooted submerged. For that, I have given two examples. The one is the Valixnaria. Valixnaria. I'm talking about the Valixnaria, which of the following is known as a rooted submerged category, right? Valixnaria. And one more example, that is a Nympia and not Nympia, Hydrilla. One more example I want to give, Hydrilla. So what are the difference between Valixnaria and the Hydrilla? In case of Valixnaria, you find the leaves are ribbon-like structure And along with you see the flower, presence of flower, right? Male flower and female flower. Male flowers are found bottom of the water body, and the female flower just near the upper part of the water body, right? Whereas in Hydrilla plant, the leaves are dissected, and the arrangements of leaves, you see all the leaves are submerged on the floating, right? So that is called rooted submerged hydrophytes. And last one more category, that is amphibious, that shows a ranunculus and type of Sagittaria. Here the example of amphibious category. I'm talking about last category, right? Amphibious. Amphi means both sides, so it shows both characteristic features. Aeration and aerobic member, right? So this is an example of, I'd like to give an example for amphibious category. The first one is a Sagittaria. Sagittaria. And one more example, which is very typical, that is a ranunculus. So these are all the example of amphibious, because that shows the heterophyllous condition. There are two types of leaves are present, right? So Sagittaria and my dear students, I have given two examples, Sagittaria and the ranunculus. So in first case, the Sagittaria, in which you say the submerged leaves are floating and the root is fixed, and in addition that, the leaves are emerged out from the water body, right? You see, just outside of the water body, you find the leaves and the flowers also. This is an example of amphibious category. That means it shows both characteristic features, emergence characters and submerged characters, right? Whereas in ranunculus, you see two types of leaves. And the first leaves are airy leaves, and the airy leaves are well developed in nature, and whereas the dissected leaves are not developed, but the surface of the structure of leaves are dissected to form like a dissected leaves, right? So that is an example of amphibious category. So here you can expect a question in both neat and board, which of the following plant has both dissected leaves and airy leaves. The example is ranunculus and Sagittaria, right? So ranunculus is a right example for presence of airy leaves and dissected leaves, right? So thank you for joining, my students. And when you come to next class, make an assignment and try to send it to your respective subject teacher, right? Once again, thank you for joining. Please take down an assignment. All of you, please take down. The first question, what is ecological adaptation? Second question, what is free floating? Third one, what is rooted floating? Hydrophytes. And fourth one, what is submerged? Hydrophytes. And one more, what is rooted plus submerged? Hydrophytes. And finally, what is amphibious? Hydrophytes.